So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to this Friday's edition of Harmonize2Energize. My name is Terry Matthews, and it's been my pleasure to share Harmonize2Energize both live and online for the past 4 years. It began on the foundation of the art of JIN SHIN JYUTSU, and for those of you that are completely brand new, those of you that may be watching the video replay later on YouTube, JIN SHIN JYUTSU is an art of harmonizing life energy as it moves through the body or not. Sometimes life energy is called prana or chi or ki, depending on what culture you're brought up in. And due to our lifestyle, we can either keep that life energy in harmony or not. In JIN SHIN JYUTSU, we relate to energy moving through pathways similar to acupuncturists. They call them meridians. We call them energy pathways. Acupuncturists adjust the flow and quality of that energy by using needles on points. And in JIN SHIN JYUTSU, we adjust that energy by using the palms of our hands, our fingers, thumbs, back of our hands. And a major difference is the size of the points, if you like, are in JIN SHIN JYUTSU, they're called safety energy locks, and they're the diameter of the palm of your hand. And there's only 26 of them left and right of the spine, and 3 in each arm. Whereas in acupuncture, there's over 100 of these energy centers, and they call them points, and they're much, much smaller. So anyway, what we like to do more and more with JIN SHIN JYUTSU is explore overlapping connections that there may be with other modalities. Can you mute yourself, please, or I will mute you?
And then we eat.
Everybody mute yourself who's not needing to speak. Okay. Got it. All right, so as I was saying, as time has gone on and Harmonize2Energize has developed, we brought on different presenters, as you know, and we're moving toward, at the moment anyway, looking at other modalities that have overlapping connections to JIN SHIN JYUTSU, whilst also experiencing JIN SHIN JYUTSU self-help practices. And today it's my great pleasure to introduce, actually I think he's been on before, but it doesn't matter, a good friend from Florida who survived the recent squall. We'll call it a squall, it's probably more like a hurricane. And I'm gonna bring him on right now and then disappear. It's Giancarlo from Florida. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Terry. Appreciate the invitation to be on the program again. And yes, we just missed the hurricane. Tuesday night, it decided to shift a few degrees more west into the Gulf of Mexico. I live on the west coast of Florida, and it went around us because we were scheduled to take a beating and ended up hitting northern Florida, and that's where they took a beating, unfortunately. So glad to be here. Glad to have electricity, because
Yeah.
you know, sometimes your days without it. And while you were doing the setup for the programming, you know, it was nice and sunny and actually balmy here, but it actually got very dark in the sky, and I saw a couple lightning bolts. So if you see me grab my computer and run, I'm on the porch, as you can see, in my back porch.
Yeah, you might want to reconsider your position there if there's lightning.
Yeah, because this is the lightning capital of the world here in Tampa, and if I see it, I'm gonna grab my computer, run indoors so I don't get blasted. But anyway, pleasure to be here, and thank you so much. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, depending on where you are. Yeah, my name is Giancarlo. I know Terry because I am a JIN SHIN JYUTSU practitioner and also an organizer in the organization that we both used to be part of. And so that's what I do for a living. I'm a JIN SHIN JYUTSU practitioner. I actually just rushed home from my office to get here and get ready for this program after doing several sessions this morning. So in talking with Terry a little earlier in the week, I was like, well, what do you want me to talk about? Last time I was on this program, I talked about this very serendipitous journey that led me into JIN SHIN JYUTSU. Or it found me. I'm not saying I found it. I think it found me, and made it part of my life from that moment on. But Terry said, hey, why don't you do some other things that involve energy? Why don't you tie them together, at least talk about that? So if you weren't there when I was telling my story, one of the things that that got me involved in JIN SHIN JYUTSU is I used to go to this little metaphysical store that which is where I took my first JIN SHIN JYUTSU self-help class. But I used to go there for a variety of things. They had meditation classes there. They had a lot of supplies for different practices, and I used to buy incense there for the martial arts studio that I ran. I've been doing martial arts close to 50 years now, and so I used to send my students there if they wanted to buy incense for their meditation practices. We'd get a discount there. So anyways, that was my story was all about how I got involved in JIN SHIN JYUTSU. So today I was going to talk a little bit about martial arts, because typically when we get to these energy conversations, we talk about the healing arts, whether it's JIN SHIN JYUTSU or acupuncture or Reiki or et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, quantum touch, healing touch, et cetera. So he said, wouldn't it be interesting if you brought in, talk about martial arts? So I decided, okay, let's talk about it. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized this is a very big conversation. So I'm just going to try and hit the highlights and then leave plenty of time for question and answers. And hopefully I can answer your questions. Like I said, I've been doing martial arts for close to 50 years. I started in the late mid 70s when I was in my late teens. And what motivated me to get in martial arts is when I was a kid, I used to read about these martial arts masters, and I was fascinated by these stories about them because, not only were they martial artists and, had that whole, combative aspect to it, but a lot of these guys were sages and philosophers and physicians of their time, priests, other religious clergy, poets. I mean, they reminded me of the Renaissance men of Europe, except they had a little bit of they had an additional set of skills, which means they knew how to use their bodies, as weapons, things like that. So, as a kid, I was fascinated by that, and kind of bugged my parents to get me involved, which they were having none of that. So when I got to my mid to late teens, I, struck out on my own and started looking to train in martial arts. And I did. I trained in a variety of martial arts. And for about 10 years, I was trying everything I could come across because, invariably I'd get involved in the martial arts, start getting, pretty competent at it. And then I finally asked the instructor, hey, when do we get to the real stuff? The energy stuff, the development of ki and all this. And they'd be like, oh, come on. That's not real. That stuff that's just baloney, right? And then I began to realize that here in the United States, martial arts is a commodity. And it was something that people were selling to make money. Became a children's activity, kids' summer camps. It's finally devolved into a gladiatorial sport with the advent of MMA, which is everywhere on TV all the time. And I wasn't interested in any of that. I mean, I practiced, I got involved in the sporting stuff. I did full contact martial arts for a while, but it wasn't why I got involved. I kind of wanted this whole package personal development thing. So about 10 years in, I finally came across an art called, at the time they were calling it Ninjutsu, which is where you get the word ninja from. And yeah, no, not the kind you see in Hollywood movies. That's all silly stuff. But I got involved with this art, and I wanted something that had a direct lineage to Japan. Well, actually any country in the Orient, but this happened to be a Japanese art. And I got involved in it because I believed it actually contained the whole package. And yes, after 30-something years of focusing on just this martial art, it does contain the full package. And for those of you who don't practice martial art, I don't know, anybody here practice martial art? Anybody? Raise your hand. I don't see anybody. Okay. So if you've never practiced martial arts, you may have all kinds of misconceptions or certain conceptions about martial arts. like I said, in the United States, it's all about sports and kids and now gladiatorial combat, stuff like that. Martial arts, as as it progressed and developed in Asia, a much more comprehensive practice than what you're going to see in most of your commercial martial arts schools here in the States, or actually anywhere in the world. When you hear the terms like Aikido or Judo or Karate Do, when you see that word Do attached to the end of a Japanese martial art, Do means way. And at a certain point in Japanese history, when martial arts became less relevant, they began they modified the martial arts to become more of a personal development, personal experience sort of thing. That's where the word Do came from, because all of these arts that you are aware of now, they're probably like less than 150 years old. And again, that came in that came in a point of Japanese history where they were no longer seen as anything practical. It was just more something you did to carry on the culture or to refine yourself, which is all well and good, but that wasn't satisfying me, as a young man looking for martial arts. I wanted the older stuff, the stuff that goes all the way back. And so the art that, like I said, I fell into, ninjutsu, it's about 1,000 years old, and it's still taught today the way it has been taught over the years, unadulterated, which, in the martial sense of it, it means it's more geared towards battlefield combat and stuff like that. And while that does interest me, and that that's a bit important part of the art, there was the whole philosophical, meditative aspect that's what I was looking for. That's what I was looking for, the full package. And this art had it. Okay, so today it's called Budo Taijutsu because the Grandmaster decided he didn't, the name Ninjutsu, people would associate it with all the silly, goofy ninja movies that had started up in the 80s and stuff like that. And he wanted to kind of separate the art from the silliness. But anyways, the original name was Ninjutsu or Ninpo. So I got involved in that art, and that's when I really started getting to experience things, more the esoteric aspect of martial art. I was introduced to a category of the art, or an aspect of the art. It's called Kyusho Jitsu. Kyusho Jitsu means pressure point striking. So that's where obviously you learn to use pressure points. We call them safety energy locks in JIN SHIN JYUTSU for healing, but in the martial arts English translation would say pressure points. So learning how to utilize those to help control people, or prevent them from hurting you, things like that. And I remember my first experience with that was an instructor asked me to offer up my arm, and I did. And he just lightly with his fingertips struck a point, like which we would associate with a high 9, well, actually a low 19 in JIN SHIN JYUTSU. And I watched an actual ripple move up my arm, which actually was the like tracking of the actual pathway, which totally freaked me out. It was a little painful. It kind of numbed my arm, and then it went away. But I was like, okay, so now I know this stuff is real. I know there's this much deeper hidden side to the martial arts, and I was very excited to get exposure to that. So in this art, we were heavily invested in meditation, as well as learning the physical skills. I mean, this is where I first learned that energy goes up the back and down the front. Up the back as you inhale, down the front as you exhale. I started learning about different pathways in the body, how energy ran down through the arms and the legs, through the chest. Doesn't match up exactly with JIN SHIN JYUTSU, but it's pretty doggone close in terms of energy movement. And we began talking about energy a lot and using the word in a lot of different contexts. So even just basic gross physical movement, we began talking about energy, the energy of the movement, the energy of the attack, the energy of this, as opposed to just the movement. And so from the most mundane or the grossest aspect of just moving out of the way of an attack, the instructors would teach me how to move with the energy of the attack. Well, I didn't know what that meant at first. I'd hear the language, I have no idea what you're talking about. But then I began to develop that skill in that sense. And essentially what it means is matching the energy of the person that you're interacting with, okay? Which again, in JIN SHIN JYUTSU, we're working with a stationary body. They're laying on the table, allowing us to work on them. In the martial arts, you're working with and on a moving entity. So it's much more complex, it's a lot more sophisticated, because you have to learn first just physical mechanics, forget the energy stuff, just learning how to move your own body. And then you have to learn how to move your body in concert with another person's body, and their movement, and their intentions, and things like that. And through years and years of practice, then you start learning to develop a sense of intuition about when people are going to move, how they're going to move, and your body starts to kind of adjust without you consciously telling it to. And this is what we call the energy connection between, what we call in Japanese, uke and tori. Uke is the attacker, tori is the receiver, the person doing the technique or whatever. Once I started to experience that, it's a phenomenal feeling, because in our physical world that we deal with, we tend to sort of just operate very mechanically. But once you start appreciating this sense of literally feeling the energy of movement, it starts changing the way you move and how you interact with everything around you, including inanimate objects. And I know sometimes my language is going to limit how I can express my experience, and maybe you could find the right language for a question and I can answer it. But that's how I first started experiencing energy. And then, of course, through I got exposure to some pretty sophisticated meditation techniques, because the martial art I'm associated with has a lot of influence from Japanese Shintoism, as well as Taoism from China, and some esoteric schools of Buddhism. And when I say that, some people are like, what do you mean by esoteric schools of Buddhism? I don't understand. Well, I don't know what your experience is with different Eastern philosophies and trains of thought, but in Buddhism, there are three primary schools. In Southeast Asia, this is called Theravada. Theravada, and I'm not doing these justice, but I have a limited amount of time. So in Theravada, there's a belief that you can reach enlightenment only if you are a monk or a nun. In other words, if you dedicate your whole life to meditation, things like that, then you may receive enlightenment. Theravada translates into like the smaller vessel. Then there's a bigger school called the Mahayana. Mahayana means bigger vessel. Zen, which is what most people associate with Japanese Buddhism, is part of the Mahayana. The bigger vessel means, no, anybody can become enlightened. You don't have to be a monk. You don't have to be a nun. If you practice your meditation, you're a good person, you're diligent with your practice, it's possible, maybe in a few lifetimes, that you can achieve this enlightenment. And then there's the Buddhism of Tibet, which is called Vajrayana. Vajra means thunderbolt, and Vajra is also a ceremonial relic that Tibetans use in their practice. And Tibetan Buddhism tends to be very ritualistic, and they use a lot of implements and chanting, this, that, and the other. And they believe that you can become enlightened in this lifetime, like that, if you practice properly. Well, outside of Tibet, you don't find Vajrayana, except there are two schools in Japan, two lineages. One's called Tendai, and I happen to be fortunate enough to get introduced to Tendai meditation practices, which is part of a ninjutsu. And that helps cultivate ki, the types of meditation, the different rituals that I got initiated in. And that's also where, both in the martial art and in the Buddhist practices, where I first got introduced to mudras. Now, Terry knows what I'm talking about when mudras. In JIN SHIN JYUTSU, we have mudras, and you can look in the text if you're a JIN SHIN JYUTSU practitioner. And you're encouraged to practice these daily mudras every day as part of your self-help. Well, I've been exposed to that many years before I ever got exposed to JIN SHIN JYUTSU. One of the differences is when you get exposed to, by the way, mudra is a hand gesture. So, for instance, in the art of ninjutsu, there's a practice called the kuji or kuji kiri, which is energy strike or energy movement, right? So, you go through these variety of, hand placements, each one with a specific symbol, each one with a specific sound, right? Each one used for very specific purposes. All right. So our use of mudras in the martial arts and in these meditation practices somewhat different than in JIN SHIN JYUTSU. It's one of the things that attracted me to JIN SHIN JYUTSU when I started seeing things I recognized. I'm like, oh my God, they use mudras in this art too. This, obviously this is for me. But I had already been exposed for decades prior to coming into JIN SHIN JYUTSU. And one of the things I noticed differently, and Carrie, you'll find this interesting. In JIN SHIN JYUTSU, we do the mudras and we're told to hold them until, you feel a certain way or for a certain amount of time, incorporate it into a certain self-help practice. But in the other practices that I study, if you were going to use a mudra, first you have to be initiated into it, and that usually takes place over several days. And each mudra is typically associated either with a Buddhist bodhisattva or Buddhist deity, or sometimes a Taoist figure. And so you kind of have to learn the story of that figure, because that story helps you to understand and process what that mudra is about. And then you also learn the mudra, and then you also learn the mantra, which is a chant. And so you would spend like a whole weekend just immersing yourself in that and really kind of learning how to use that mudra, so that when you wanted to call upon it, you had all this background into using that mudra to generate a certain type of an energy. So all those gestures I just showed you, each one has a very specific meaning, a very specific use. And sometimes we could do a practice where we'll do all 9 of those, and other times we'll just focus on one of those if we want to really hone in on developing a certain resonance in the body, affecting your energetic frequency in a certain way. You'll recite that mantra while holding that mudra, while either looking at a picture of the symbol that goes with it or imagining it in your head. And it works, it works. It takes some practice, but you'll feel a dramatic shift in your energy. So anyways, I got all this, this training experience, except through the meditation practices. But even the physical movements themselves were explained to all the students in terms of the 5 elements, right? So it's called Godai. Godai means, the 5. Godai, Go is 5. I'm trying to remember what Dai is. I'm forgetting right now. So in a lot of martial arts, you're taught, all right, if you got to defend yourself or defend your loved ones, it's all about being aggressive, 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 aggressive. And the problem with that is that's just not true to life. Okay, some people just are not aggressive by nature. Other people can tap into their aggression, but we look at certain issues. What about if I'm just not feeling aggressive and I have to defend? What if I've had the flu for the last 4 days? That's my first day up out of bed. You're not gonna feel real aggressive because your body's weak, right? So this whole idea of, oh yes, if you want to defend yourself, just be more aggressive than the other person, is baloney. So the whole idea was, no, we have 5 categories of movement, right? One categorizes earth, one categorizes water, one categorizes fire, one categorizes wind, and the one called the void. And each one of those is associated, each one of those types of movements is associated with a particular energy center in your body, which some people would, I don't know if all of you recognize but the term chakra, but each one's associated with a different chakra. So earth is when you feel like you're in total control and you can't, you can't be moved. Then you would operate in a more earthy, and the movement tends to be physically up and down, very grounded. And if that's how you were feeling when you had to defend somebody, you wouldn't switch into aggression, because that's not where your energy is at the time. Your energy is at the low point of your spine. So you would actually work in concert with the energy that's going on in your body versus trying to fake it, right? Which can result in pretty disastrous results. If you're feeling uncertain or scared, then you would operate from the second chakra, right? That's just below your navel, your hara. And that tends to push your stomach back. So the movements tend to be more retreating and angular, like creating distance so that you can observe what's going on in order to strategize what you need to do to protect yourself. If your energy is more in your solar plexus, that's more assertive energy, that's fire. Those movements tend to be much more forward and piercing. Okay, that would be where you might find it. If you're feeling that way, that's where aggression would be a natural fit for you at that moment. And then wind kind of comes from the heart chakra, and that tends to be, I don't even want to be involved in this. So the movements are very circular, kind of like you see in Aikido practice. Looks because we have a common root with Aikido. And it's kind of like, yeah, I'm just gonna like not be where the danger is. I'm gonna be everywhere but that, and that's kind of this windy thing. And the void is described as fluid creativity, where you can float from you can shift your energy from one chakra to the next and go through any of those that you need to go through, you know, to survive the situation. So, I mean, from the very beginning, that's how we were taught to move. So everything had, you know, a basis in this concept of energy. Everything had a basis in the concept of chakras. Everything had a basis in the concept of, you know, the elemental system, which, you know, it's common to all cultures across the world, this whole earth, water, fire, wind kind of thing. So, and I see a bunch of questions lining up. I'm going to answer them in a minute. I just had a couple things I wanted to prepare, and then I figured I'd give you enough to think about that you would have good questions. So let's see. Hold on. I talked about that. Talked about mudras. Oh, yeah. So when I talked about the mudras, I talked about, you know, the understanding the story of a particular bodhisattva or whatever it is, you know, deity. I also talked about speaking a mantra and then doing this. So that's representative of what's called a philosophical truth in a lot of Eastern philosophy. And that is, in Japanese, it's called sanmitsu. Sanmitsu means triple secret. What does that mean? It means when you align your thoughts and your words and your deeds, you create reality. Those are called the building blocks of reality. So in the process of learning mudras, when you look at an image of, let's say it's a bodhisattva or deity called Fudomyo, okay, which is called a wrathful deity. As you're looking at that, you're processing what is that? What does he symbolize? He symbolizes immovable, indomitable spirit. Okay, and then you're saying a certain mantra that goes along with it. That's thought, word. You know, so you say right? There's this very emphatic recitation. And then the deed part is, well, now I've got this specific mudra, okay, which is a sword mudra, right? Come on. And that's trying to harness this feeling of being indomitable, right? It's being immovable. So if you had to go out and do public speaking or something where you were a little nervous about it, you know, you would use this sort of a thing to sort of summon up this feeling of, you know, being this, like I said, indomitable spirit. All right. So that's the whole thought, word, deed thing right there. Which again, when I came to JIN SHIN, they said, no, just hold this mudra for 2 minutes and then go to that one. I was kind of like, okay, I'll do it. I mean, it works. But it was a very different experience than what I had been experiencing on my other practices. So, okay, talked about. Okay. One of the last things I'll say before I look at your questions. Hold on. A few things. So I talked about Kyusho Jitsu being disrupting energy. When I looked at the safety energy lock chart, you know, I'm looking at it and again, I'm thinking about all the Kyusho Jitsu charts. I'm like, oh, how similar is this JIN SHIN JYUTSU chart to this Kyusho Jitsu chart? You know, I learned some of these, you know, we have numbers in JIN SHIN JYUTSU, like, you know, 13, 15, 20. In the martial arts, they have, you know, cool names like Rumon, number 13. That's actually called Rumon. Rumon means Dragon's Gate, right? Very cool, very martially sounding instead of 13. Number 15, which is in the crease of your groin, your hip, where your hip joins your thigh. That's called Koi. You know, they all have all these different names. And I've learned, you know, learning to use those, to strike in those, to have precision strikes in those things. They work very well. And, you know, from a physical standpoint, those are just sensitive areas that cause the body to have an autonomic response. But from an energetic standpoint, if you are at that level, it actually, you know, as we know, you guys would know because of what you do, it actually disrupts the flow of energy in certain areas temporarily, at least hopefully temporarily. So that's one of the other similarities. And then last but not least, and if we were in person, I would actually do some of these exercises with you, but we're not. So we also learned to project energy. We used, I don't do much of this anymore. It's when I was younger, really into some of this stuff. Or we spend these weekends meditating, going through all these kind of processes, and then experimenting with them. And so this is going to sound a little over the top, and that's okay. If you think it's over the top, you're welcome to feel that way. But I've actually seen, and actually I've been able to physically push somebody from across a room. So, and had myself pushed, usually the people are behind you, so you're not reading what they're doing and then subliminally suggesting to yourself. So they're usually behind you, so you can't see what they're going to do. But I've seen energy used in all kinds of ways that would blow your mind. I don't proclaim to see auras, but there have been in some of these workshops that I've gone to where I can't say, the only way I could describe it is, I could see an aura, and I could see an aura moving kind of before the body actually moved. Of course, this is after days and days and days of meditating, so you're a little more sensitive. I don't experience that in normal everyday life, but during some of these really intensive meditative workshops, I would see stuff like that. And then last but not least, if we were in a room together, I would do this experiment with you, because I used to do it all the time when I ran a martial arts studio. I can show you with a little practice how to change your weight, how to change, the density of your weight. Won't change your weight. You're still probably weighed the same on the scale. But Terry's met my wife, and none of you know my wife. She's 4'11". She weighs, well, at the time we were running the studio together, about 100 pounds. And I would have people come up behind her and wrap their hands around her and lift her up to kind of get a feel for what 100 pounds feels like. And then I would have her do a meditation right there. I'd have her close her eyes and have her hands in a specific mudra, which really summons that earth energy. And, imagine becoming rooted to the center of the earth, like a mountain, and take her through a guided meditation. And then I would have the person try and pick her up, and, have these big guys, this little 100-pound woman, and they're struggling to get her even a fraction of an inch off the ground because of the change of the energy. It's just a densing down of the energy. And then take her immediately to another mudra and meditation where she goes to the opposite end of the spectrum, the wind. The wind is very light and ethereal. And then have the same person lift her up and, almost throw themselves on their back because she was so light that suddenly, they applied way too much pressure because, she seemed like she just had no weight to her at all. And anybody can do it. You don't have to be, 50 years training in martial arts. Literally, I would take beginning students or even people just visiting, and I would take them through the exercise so they can see how just by using their mind, they can shift some things very dramatically, within themselves. All right. Anyways, that's all I had to say. So now I can look at all your many questions and answer them. All right. And if you prefer, you can actually voice your questions and then make it more of a conversation. Okay, talking about not liking the smell of pot. Okay, better to be high on life. Okay, I got that. Hello from Switzerland. Good evening. I'm going through all of them. Okay, very grateful. Yes, I am grateful too. Thank you, Janet. Very grateful. I miss. Oh, do. So when you say Aikido, the last syllable, do, the do sound, that means the way or the path, right? So Aikido, Aiki has to do with harmony, harmony of movement. So that means the way of harmony of movement. Judo, before Aikido, there was Aikijutsu. Aikijutsu is the actual combat art, and much more rough and tumble than the art of Aikido. Judo came the way I don't remember what the prefixes mean. Judo was originally jujitsu, and the original forms of jujitsu were pretty rough and tumble. Again, these were unarmed samurai arts, aikijutsu and jujitsu. You know, these were designed for warriors who, in battle, you know, broke their weapons. They don't have a weapon, but they still got to survive. So these were pretty rough and tumble arts. But when they put the do on the end of them, now it's more about refining. You know, it lost some of its original effectiveness and became more of a personal development type of a tool. Nothing wrong with that, but it lost a lot. It got divorced from the past. All those arts. And by the way, the warriors in Japan, and this is true everywhere in the world, but the warriors in Japan didn't just learn Aikido or karate. You had to know the full collection of warrior arts, meaning you had to know all the weapons, and you had to know horsemanship and swimming and scaling walls, and the art that I got involved in actually still teaches all of that stuff. I haven't done horsemanship. I don't own a horse. You know, it's a little above my pay grade to own a horse, but you know, I learned a lot of the other stuff. So anyways, okay, that's what do means. Thank you. Well, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Can you show a few of the mudras, especially ones dealing with feeling safe? Well, all of the ones that I did would, in some sense, have to do with feeling safe, part of the Kuji-Kiri, and there's more than the ones that I showed. So let's, you know, all right. So this, well, I gotta close the chat so I can see what my hands look like. So hold on, how am I gonna get to show this? Let me turn my chair. All right. So the last two fingers are starting to loop. All right. Hold on, I gotta do it without showing you. There you go. The last two fingers loop, then the index fingers and the thumbs touch. Actually, the middle fingers and the thumbs touch. Index fingers form a sword. All right. This is associated with a character called, it's called in Japanese, it's called Fudomyo. He's very popular in Japan, very popular with martial arts, associated with samurai and ninjas alike. And that's a flaming, and he's what's called a wrathful deity. And he's scary looking on purpose, because his purpose is to scare away evil. And he has, in his right hand, he has a flaming sword to cut through ignorance. And then in his left hand, he has a lasso that he uses to lasso people who are straying from the path, pull you back on the path. So when you're doing it, and again, these are just symbols, right? I mean, no practitioner is supposed to take them seriously as actual entities, but it's a symbol for being immovable or indomitable and staying on the path, you know, whatever you associate the path with being. So when you're doing that and you're you know, reciting the mantra and doing some of the motions, and you know, you just imagine that, you know, you are becoming this, whatever you symbolize as indomitable or, you know, movable. And like I said, you know, you do that when you're feeling like you need to be safe, when you need when you're uncomfortable and you need to accomplish something, but you have to get over your discomfort in order to accomplish it. And one of them in my training, part of that was like, anytime you accomplished something, you felt really good about yourself, you know, and you felt like you really, you know, showed some, I don't want some strength, whether it's, you know, fortitude, whatever, is that you would actually recite that to yourself to sort of subconsciously invest your successes into that whole concept of the mudra and the mantra, so that next time when you maybe aren't feeling really good and you need to feel strong, you keep in, you know, you've invested so much of your subconscious into putting your successes and your strength into this symbol, into this mantra, into this image, that now when you recite it, all that comes back to you. Now you feel powerful again. Okay, so you know, there's a lot of psychology there.
John, I
All right.
think Tom had his hand up, but it's not up anymore. Tom,
Yeah.
did you?
But yeah, I did Taekwondo for 9 years. And one of the things I realize now, I have two artificial hips, is that 60 to 80% of the things in Taekwondo I cannot do with the artificial hip without damaging it. So it's something one has to be careful.
Yeah.
As you get older, I'm 80.
Well, and let me say this. I used to be a Taekwondo instructor. Like I said, I spent that first 10 years, actually more than 10, studying other martial arts. Some of this overlapped with ninjutsu and Taekwondo and a lot of the karate I was training. A lot of that actually will damage your hips, which is why I stopped practicing those arts, because of all those high kicks and stuff. So yeah, this particular art does not involve anything like it. Actually involves all natural body movements. So there's nothing in the movements that we do where you're asking your body to do something unnatural or fighting gravity, which again, what I liked about Taekwondo and karate and all that stuff when I was a young guy full of piss and vinegar was that I had to force myself to do all this stuff and jump and kick and spin. The athleticism of it is what made it worthwhile for me, because I wasn't getting this other deeper training out of it that I'm getting out of the ninjutsu. So I made up for it by just doing more athletic kind of stuff until I found the right fit. So, all right. Mudras that are connected to JSJ. So this is called the pagoda mudra. And if you look in your textbook 1, this is one of the ones to practice. They tell you to practice daily. I'm trying to remember some of the other ones by name. Yeah, I can't remember the names. But these two you'll find in all these, most of these things, well, probably all of them come from India. So if you look at certain practices from India, yoga practices, Hindu practices, Buddhist practices, you'll see some of these mudras. That's where they originated from. About the elements, why some versions of. Okay, so there's a question here: why some traditional Chinese medicine don't include wood? Okay, because I talked about the 5 elements: earth, water, fire, wind, and void. That threw me for a long time, because when I would go to JIN SHIN classes, they would always use the Chinese version, earth, water, fire, wood, and metal. Well, the wood and the metal and the wind and the void, it actually kind of could be, they're actually kind of representing each other. But what I went ahead and started looking through some of my texts on ninjutsu and Tendai Buddhist practices and whatever. And what I found was there's 2 of these maps, and if you ever see them represented symbolically, they're represented, and I don't want to freak anybody out, but they're represented as pentagrams, right, with the kanji in each corner, representing all the elements, all right, typically with void on top. And there's 2. There's one that's there's one 5-pointed star that represents the reality in the universe. Okay, and that's the one that's got the wood and the metal. And then there's the 5-pointed star that has the wind and the void, and that represents your personal universe, your personal reality. That's what I found. Now, at least in the types of schools that I trained in, you might find different references that say different things. That's pretty common. But that's what I found, because it was driving me nuts, because I spent decades with earth, water, fire, wind, void, and then I go to JIN SHIN classes and the instructor talk about the one using metal and wood, and I'd be like, my brain was like having trouble processing, because it was the wind void model was reflexive in my thinking. But when they said metal and wood, I'm like, what are they talking about? Metal and wood. But that's what I learned, is that one tends to be like the big picture and one is more the personal picture. That's what I heard. Very interesting. Feldenkrais practitioner, as well as JSJ. Feldenkrais has studied with Jigoro Kano and some judo. Oh, excellent. So a couple times Feldenkrais training has come through town, and I've tried to go because I know people have spoken very highly of that training, and my schedule just never works out. So I'm glad that you're seeing similarities there. That's pretty common that we start seeing similarities in different arts. I mean, there's only so many truths out there, and it's just represented differently through different cultures. But yes, Sheldon Price, thank you for this. I found Qigong practice. Yeah, I'm also a Qigong instructor. Standing meditation, very helpful, feeling my body. Yep. Yeah, so yeah, I'm a Qigong instructor, and yeah, I was well into JIN SHIN JYUTSU when I became a Qigong instructor. So yeah, I felt, some very powerful sensations doing that. And one of the interesting things was when I first got involved in JIN SHIN JYUTSU, and I actually got involved in Reiki and some other things prior to JIN SHIN JYUTSU, is because of all the years of martial arts training and meditation and this other experimentation with energy through, moving forms and stuff like that. People would, the instructors would come up to me or I'd work on them or work with me, and they'd be like, wow, that's, okay, great. How many years have you been studying JIN SHIN JYUTSU? Or how many years have you been doing, Reiki or this, that, and the other? And I'd be like, that's my second class. I've been doing it for a few months. But that's just, that's not an honest answer. I'm saying it's answering them. I was answering them quite honestly and truthfully, but the reality of it is because we're talking about energy and the movement of energy, I probably could have just as easily said and been very honest saying, no, I've been working with energy for decades, just kind of in a more, more destructive fashion. If you want to look at it that way, because instead of healing, we were talking about, defending yourself, which ultimately means harming another human being, which is a little unsavory when you put it that way. But I like to be honest and transparent and operate in integrity. So that is what it is. And one of the interesting things, I grabbed this from my office before I came home because I happened to see it. I was like, oh, look at this. In some of my advertising, when I go to health fairs, I have this little thing here, and I have discovered this picture, which I have in a bigger form, and it's I'll put it up close so you can see it. Whoops, hold on. All right, so it's this old Japanese man, and he's obviously administering. He's administering to this young man who doesn't look very happy, and if you look at it, it looks like he's actually pulse listening because his hands are actually across here. He's doing single-handed like a lot of my acupuncture friends do. They like to do it single-handed, whereas we do it two-handed. And I captured that photo and used it, from a stock file. And I use it in some of my advertising once in a while because if you look at his sleeve, whoops, I keep forgetting. If you look just sticking out of his sleeve, that's the handle of what's called a wakizashi. Wakizashi is a short sword that samurai always wore. They wore it indoors. You only wear your long sword outside. So I saw that, and right away the sword handle stuck out because I train with swords and things like that. I'm like, it looks like because there's other pictures of them, and it looks where he has hand placements, and it looks like they're doing JIN SHIN JYUTSU. And I'm like, holy cow, look at that. It's probably like a mid to late 19th century photograph. But oftentimes if you're a warrior, particularly, a master level warrior, you also had to be a healer. And that's one of the other things that appealed to me about the type of martial art I wanted to get involved in as a young man. And of course, I didn't get involved to the healing part till decades later, because that's when I discovered JIN SHIN JYUTSU. And but I felt that it makes me more complete because I figured, the people involved in warrior training should also be involved in healing, learning to heal. So it's the yin and yang, or as the Japanese say, the in and yo, of how to use energy is, yes, for possibly violent applications, but also for, healing applications. So any other questions? Yes.
Is there one practice that you would like to share with us that we could all do together?
Oh, you're talking about for self-help?
Yeah. From ninjutsu.
Oh.
Or if not, from ninjutsu.
Yeah, because again, while there's similarities, and I originally set out to sort of like study these two and figure out how they blended, I actually compartmentalize because I do JIN SHIN JYUTSU as a healing practice for a living, and kind of wanted to keep my mindset pure, for lack of a better you know, when I'm working on people for this purpose of providing relief and healing, and I don't want to start blending in the martial concepts into that. I don't want that to kind of get in there, because that's not about healing necessarily. It's about disrupting, and I was like, okay, you know, I don't want to look at this. I don't want to compare them too much, because I don't want to start cross thinking about these things. So I could do something with you know, self-help, yes. And so the self-help that I like is, I'm a big fan of opening up the 15s, because I like to bring joy and laughter into my life, because I feel there's just never enough of that in anyone's life. So, you know, I like put my right hand down on the 15 and the, you know, inguinal crease there between your thigh and your hip. And then the opposite hand comes across and holding number 3. And if time permits, I like to do 36 breaths. The numbers are important. And take a nice deep breath in, release. So the number 9 is very auspicious in a lot of Eastern meditation practices, including mine. And 36 breaths. That's 36 a multiple of 9. 108 is a multiple of 9. That's how many beads you have on a mala, mala bead chain. So I do things in multiples of 9s a lot of times, just because I'm trained to. So
I thought it was fascinating earlier on, John. Didn't you say that a martial arts movement towards the inguinal crease was how you affected or stopped somebody? So did you not say something like that? And it's interesting that the 15 is all about joy and laughter.
Yeah.
Level.
So the weapon of choice, Terry, for that is this. This is called a boshikan, which is your thumb. It's usually when somebody's in close and they've wrapped themselves around you, which means if your hand's free, one of them's free, and that's exposed, it's basically a thumb on top of your fist. And if you just put it in the general area, the contours of the body will automatically guide it directly into the 15. And if you apply by bending your knees with your body weight, it automatically folds the hips and encourages people to sit down very quickly. And you'd be surprised that the body tends to collapse around the thumb right on the 15. And yeah, people will kind of take a seat real quick. So yes.
Yeah, so in a way you could look at it, or I could look at it, a kind of yin and yang, although obviously there's yin qualities and yang qualities in both aspects. But if I wanted to contrast it, I could say maybe the martial arts were more yang and JIN SHIN JYUTSU was more yin.
Yep. Yeah. That would be an accurate way to do. Yeah. One accurate way to describe it.
Yeah. Yeah. Just one way of looking at it. Yeah. This has been fascinating. I feel like I missed out on a whole journey here. You mentioned Aikido. And this is related to, or it's got aspects of Aikido in it, the ninjutsu.
It's got, yes, it does. It's got aspects of, all of those arts were broken out. They were part of a more collective thing, and they were broken out individually. So there are aspects of all the martial arts you'll see in what I do, because they're supposed to come as a total package, not as individual pieces.
So do you know, presumably there might be an association of ninjutsu. I'm just curious how widespread it is in the world, or in the US at least.
Yeah, it's widespread worldwide. The organization is called the Bujinkan. Bu is anything to do with warrior. Bujinkan is warrior training hall. And yeah, there's probably I think there's like 200,000-300,000. Hello, Bob.
I love it.
My favorite little ninja.
Ninja.
There's probably about 200,000-300,000 practitioners worldwide of the art. It really kind of took off in the 80s with all the silly movies, kind of attracted people to it. It's nothing at all like. Well, actually, no martial arts are like what you see in the movies. That's all Hollywood stuff. But yeah, it's actually quite popular around the world. Hard to find though, because a lot of like I teach, I have a handful of students that I teach. I don't have a commercial school anymore, and here comes Bob again. Hey, Bob. So yeah, most of the people, and I know some very high level people here in the area that teach. We have a handful of students each, and we share students with each other, and we often teach out of our garage or at parks, places like that. It's sort of kind of off the radar deliberately, because this way we can just find the people we really want to teach and teach them the art the way it's supposed to be taught, and not like when I ran a commercial school, that really kind of handcuffs you on what you can teach and how you can teach, because it's more about paying the bills and keeping the lights on in the studio. So you kind of have to accept people you normally wouldn't want to teach. But I don't have to do that.
So, all right. It sounds as though you're going to be discerning who you invite. But is there an association that people could connect with to find out if there was anyone teaching in their area?
I'm going to put it in the. Come on, where you at? Ooh.
Put it in the chat.
Yeah. So this is the name of the martial arts organization. It's called the Bujinkan. And you can look that up. You find people, and most people will they'll interview people who want to train, because you don't want to have to restrict what you're teaching and how you're teaching and stuff like that. So you want people who are open-minded, who want who aren't gonna freak out if you start showing them some of the stuff that I talked about. Also, some of the stuff's pretty serious in terms of self-defense. You don't want to hand that off to anybody. So that's the Bujinkan. Somebody asked me earlier, you're welcome. Somebody asked about the practice, and I wasn't sure if they meant the meditation practice, but I will put that in there. This is a Japanese practice. Good luck finding anybody in the States. There's only a few people. That's the Buddhist meditation practice called Tendai Mikyo. Maybe on the West Coast of the United States, we'll have a lot bigger Japanese population. And then somebody asked me about, I think, the martial art. So the old name and then the new name. Old name and new name. Boom. Oops, that is not the old name. I misspelled it completely. Hold on. I'm embarrassed. Hold on. Ninjutsu. By the way, I'm going to share this with you because I know we're getting ready to leave. If you want to know what the word ninja means, because when you say ninja, people get this idea of a black-clad masked assassin, and they figure that's obviously what it means. That is actually not what it means at all. The word ja means person, right? And nin, the nin symbol actually just means perseverance. So a ninja is somebody who perseveres. And I would have to go into the whole history of the actual ninja clans and why they were said to persevere, because they were persecuted and managed to survive. But yeah, ninja. By the way, they never called themselves ninja. That was a more modern term that was applied like in the 20th century to them historically, but they never called themselves that. They refer to themselves as shinobi. So anyways, there you go.
Obi-Wan Shinobi. Maybe.
Yeah. That's not a coincidence either. George Lucas studied Japanese martial philosophy and the whole, I don't want to say folklore, but the whole mystical thing around Japanese martial art. In fact, Darth Vader's helmet is actually shaped after a samurai helmet. If you look at a samurai helmet, look at Darth Vader's, that's where Lucas got that from. So
yeah, I heard that Yoda was based on yoga. I heard that George Lucas does transcendental meditation. Yeah, a lot of these ideas do come from people who've experienced those energies for sure. And what about Bob?
Bob, he's a sweetheart.
Bob is a sweetheart. Bob, he's a cutie. Is he fairly old now?
He is. He's probably about 10.
Yeah, 10. But he's still quite nimble.
Yep,
as it were. Well, this has been absolutely amazingly interesting. I'm just going to stop the recording because we're at the hour.